Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopolis Ideas Lab. All on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Good morning and welcome both to our guests on the live stream and the few folks who've been able to join us here for this event at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. My name is Joseph Majkut. I'm the director of our Energy Security and Climate Change Program. We're very glad to be hosting a conversation today with Dr. Fatih Birol on the challenges of the energy transition and the global response to climate change. Two pieces of housekeeping before we begin. The first, for our in-person guests, thank you for joining us. CSIS is a vaccinated facility, and we're welcoming you as we all try to struggle through how to reopen to have these important conversations in person. So thank you for your attendance. If something is to happen, if there's a fire alarm or an emergency to which we have to respond, please follow the instructions of a CSIS employee. And I believe the tradition states that we all exit out the back and go for ice cream over at the National Geographic Society. For those who are attending our via live stream, we welcome and encourage your participation, particularly as we sit down for a conversation. There's a function on the website for which you're viewing this event, if you're watching it live, that allows you to insert questions. Our staff will port those to me so that you have we'll do our best to provide equal access to the conversation. Our conversation today begins with an introduction of Dr. Birol by a second special guest. John Hess is the CEO of the Hess Corporation and, importantly, a trustee of CSIS. He's an energy leader and has worked for decades to lead his company through various stages of development and through various iterations as a business. He's also a leader for the broader energy industry in the United States, sitting on several important boards, the American Petroleum Institute, economic councils, etc. Rather than lead the long list of accolades that he holds, I would turn the conversation over to him. Welcome, Mr. Hess, to the podium, and thank you for kicking off our conversation, sir.
Thank you, Joseph, and most of all, good morning to everyone. And it's a great pleasure to welcome my dear friend, Dr. Fatih Birol, back to CSIS. You often come here to introduce your world energy outlook, and obviously COVID set us back with all the travel bans, and it's great to have you back here in the United States and at CSIS, and we're all anxious to hear your words and your thoughts about the energy transition. As most of you all know, Dr. Birol is the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency and is really the world's most respected authority on the energy transition, and we're very fortunate to have him here today. Dr. Birol has served as Executive Director of the IEA since 2015 and has worked there at this important organization for over 25 years, so that's a great accomplishment. The IEA, as many of you know, was formed in 1974 by the United States under Henry Kissinger's direction to work with the OECD countries to address the energy security issues that were created and as a result of the supply disruptions due to the Arab oil embargo. And under Dr. Birol's wise leadership and courageous leadership, the IEA has since been transformed, making it truly an international organization. You've talked about that at other CSIS sessions, opening its doors to major emerging economies, including Brazil, China, India, South Africa, increasing the agency's reach and share of global demand for energy from 40% to over 75% today. Dr. Birol has earned well-deserved and hard-earned numerous awards over the years for his outstanding work. Most recently, he was named in the Time 100 Times annual list of the world's most important influential people, and just recently, traveling to Abu Dhabi, he received the UAE's ADIPEC Lifetime Achievement Award. And Fatih, congratulations on this well-deserved recognition. Fatih, you know better than anyone that the world has two Herculean challenges ahead of it. how to provide 20% more energy in the next 20 years as the world's population and economy grow, and how to achieve the global ambition for net zero emissions by 2050. The IEA's World Energy Outlook, recently published in October prior to COP26, offers 4 scenarios to help guide us here in the United States, but also to policy makers across the world. The energy transition is going to take a long time, cost a lot of money, and need technologies, many of which don't exist today. Fatih, you have always been a voice of reason and wisdom. We look forward to hearing your thoughts today on the global efforts to address climate change, the progress made at COP26, and the work we all need to do to ensure an affordable, just, and secure energy transition. Fatih, welcome.
Very many thanks, John, for this extremely warm and generous welcome. It's always a great pleasure to see you, and it's always a great pleasure to come to CSIS. It is one of the traditions for me. I love traditions, to be honest with you. Some people get bored, but there are certain things which are traditions you do all the time, and you don't get bored. You enjoy a lot, and I am very happy once again to come to CSIS. And I was telling Mr. Hamre, is he here? I just saw him a couple of minutes ago. I feel at home when I come to CSIS, and hope to come here even more often. So, John, I am going to share with the colleagues here and the colleagues who are following us a few notes, few thoughts, and we can discuss later your questions, your comments, as it is a very exciting theme, energy and climate change. But may I also thank you, Joseph, for organizing this meeting. Several diplomats, several friends, several colleagues are here. I want to especially recognize my friend, the Iraqi ambassador, Dr. Farid Yassin, from whom I learned a lot on the Middle East, oil, geopolitics, and climate change. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for being with us, in addition to all the ambassadors, all the diplomats we have here. So, dear colleagues, John, you framed the question perfectly, how we are going to see energy demand going to increase, which is the lifeblood of the economy, economic growth, prosperity, but at the same time reach our climate goals. I will try to give a few answers to that, but before that I want to come up with one in my view, a phrase that I like a lot. Energy is good, emissions are bad. So I want to frame this because our aim to reach our climate goals might be sometimes misinterpreted, that the people think energy is a bad thing. Energy is a wonderful thing. It makes our life easier, more comfortable, more productive. But the issue is the emissions. How do we get the energy to homes, to industry, to mobility, but reducing the emissions? Now, before going to some of the more spicy issues on energy and climate change, I want to remind us 3 basic, very simple facts to, so that we keep in mind throughout our discussion. Number 1, the climate change, about 80% of emissions causing climate change comes from the energy sector, which means without reducing the emissions in the energy sector, we have no chance whatsoever to reach our climate goals. This is number one. The 80% comes from there. Second, a completely other fact, another fact, but I think it is very important to understand the dynamics of climate change debate. From a climate change point of view, 1 ton of emissions going to atmosphere from Jakarta or from Detroit or from Stockholm or from Johannesburg, it has the same effect on everybody. So emissions do not have a passport. So we are racing against time, we are racing against reaching our goals, but this is a race, such a race that unless everybody finishes the race, nobody wins the race. So we have to understand it's a global challenge. The third and the last fact I want to bring to your attention to frame our conversation today is not coming from me. It is coming from the scientists of this world. They say, in the future, in order to have a livable planet, which is more or less similar to today in terms of its climate, global temperature increase should be maximum 1.5 degrees Celsius, which means, now translating to energy, today's emissions, which are about 33 gigatons, need to come about 21 gigaton by 2030, so about 45% decline, and come to net zero by 2050. So this is a translation of what the overwhelming body of scientists, IPCC, tells us. If we translate this livable planet to energy emissions today, from today, it has to go down 45% next 10 years, and then to net zero by 2050. This is what the scientists tell. So based on this, we made a study at the IEA, which caused a lot of discussion, a lot of colleagues, huge support from many governments, many stakeholders around the world, but also eyebrows raised whether or not we are against energy. And I see that with the time passing, many of those colleagues who raised their eyebrows now understand, as Joe mentioned, in Middle East, for example, you gave the United Arab Emirates completely acknowledging the IEA's role here. And also recently, with the Iraqi Deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, I wrote an op-ed published in Guardian, Iraq's perspective, UAE perspective. And I think it is also more and more understood there as well by some of the colleagues who raise their eyebrows. But there are, of course, a lot of work to do to have a better understanding for everybody. But I am extremely happy that these several financial institutions, the largest institutional investors, pension funds, companies, governments are using our work as their roadmap from different parts of the political spectrum. Now, what we have done in our report, we are innocent. We just translated what the climate scientists tell, what needs to happen in the energy sector in order to reach those targets. We did not say that it is easy, it is likely, it is this, it is that. What needs to happen? We are a translator. So, when we look at the results, what needs to happen in the energy sector, it's a Herculean effort. The entire energy sector needs to transform, go through a major transition. Is it possible? If you ask me, somebody who makes and made his hands dirty with data almost every day, every hour, it is really a very narrow pathway. but it can be still possible if there was a perfect international collaboration among the countries, if the right steps are taken. Now, what do we have to do? We have to do basically two major things, just grouping the things. Number one, the next 10 years, as I mentioned, is critical to make a major reduction of emissions. In the next 10 years, we have to see a massive expansion of the technologies which are already with us in the market today. Renewables, efficiency, electric cars, nuclear power, a major growth here. But it is not an easy thing. Let me give you one example. This year, dear colleagues, it's a very impressive number, I find. This year, we just published it last week. Of all the power plants built in the world, new capacity installed in the world, 90% were renewables. And 10% gas plus coal plus nuclear, 10%, 90% renewables. But even despite this growth is not enough to be in line with the 2030 or 2050 targets. Renewable capacity expansion should have been 3 times higher than what happened this year. So what I'm saying is, next 10 years is biggest challenge, and we need a huge expansion of renewables, energy efficiency, electric cars, nuclear and others. This is the one. The second one, it is even more challenging. There are technologies which are not yet part of the market, and we need them. They are under development. And pushing the button of the magic button, I call it the magic button of innovation, we need to bring them to the markets. What are those? A very critical one for me, carbon capture and storage, advanced nuclear technologies, advanced batteries, hydrogen applications. They have to be made part of our energy system, because renewables alone will not bring us to reach our targets. Even though they will play a very important role, we will need more than that. So innovation, especially bringing those new advanced technologies to the market, is the second homework we have in front of us. Now, what about the fossil fuels? I was having discussions I'm since 2.5 days in DC. I think one thing we have to be careful about, we shouldn't lump all the fossil fuels in one group and have policies pro, con. We should look at one by one. In terms of coal, I think we have to see if, again, I'm saying, if my sentences are always starting with if we want to reach 1.5 degrees target, we have to see unabated coal coming down, dropping down very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. And it is not only the power plants, not to build new unabated coal plants, but much more importantly, we have today more than 2,000 gigawatts of coal capacity in the world, especially in Asia, and we have to see how we are going to deal with it, especially in the developing countries where they have legitimate reasons to keep those coal plants running to fuel their economies. How we are going to reconcile this. But coal is a very clear picture. We have to see coal, unabated coal, to come down. And in terms of oil and gas, we never said that tomorrow there will be no need for oil, there will be no need for gas. There is a need for oil, there is a need for gas, even in a 1.5 degrees scenario, but it will be today, compared to today, it will be less. This is the thing. They need to go down, unabated oil and gas needs to go down significantly. From just for gas, in 2050, the gas consumption needs to be about half of it what we have today. And in terms of the investment, I will come in a moment. There needs to be investment which is today, I mean, the 2021, we expect the current oil and gas investment to be slightly higher than 300 billion US dollar. But in a 1.5 degrees scenario, in the next 10 years, it should be around 350 billion US dollar, especially for the fields which are already discovered, which are already approved. We have to invest those in order to hopefully meet the declining oil demand. So once again, IEA has never said no new oil and gas investment. We said there is no need for investment for new oil exploration, gas exploration, if the demand follows the trajectory of 1.5 degrees scenario. But dear colleagues, we cannot imagine a world where we want to reach our climate goals, and at the same time, we keep the oil and gas demand as it is today. They are not compatible. We have to choose this or that. This is a choice in front of us. Now, we see at the IEA, while oil and gas demand and coal demand, coal especially, substantially and quickly go down, we see that there is a looming volatility in the energy markets if we are not able to see an orderly transition. And I would like to pinpoint three things here. One, on the investment front. Now, current investments, I mean, we see the oil and gas investments are similar to the one we have in our 1.5 degrees scenario, but on the demand side, we do not see, on the clean energy side, we do not see the enough investments to bring the demand down, so that the demand goes in line with the similar to business as usual trend, but the supply investments go in line with the 1.5 degrees trend. And there is a tension, there is a disconnect between those two. Therefore, there is an urgent need for the governments to look at the demand side of the equation. And current clean energy investments are about $1 trillion US dollars. In order to be in line with our climate goals, they should be about $3 trillion US dollars. There's the need for increase of a factor of 3, and this needs to happen especially emerging countries. This is one of the tension points when it comes to the disorderly transition. The second one is, some of you may know, we made a major study again early this year. It is about the critical minerals. What we all talk, the critical minerals are important, they are rare and this and that, but we wanted to tell you we lack numbers. We look at in a world which goes in line with the 1.5 degrees, there'll be a lot of electric cars, solar panels, the windmills, and where will they get the input from? We look at how much lithium, how much cobalt, how much nickel, how much copper is needed, and what we see is incredible. On average, this critical minerals demand will be multiplied by a factor of 6. And as it happens, the critical minerals, the production and processing are geographically concentrated, even more than the oil and gas. So if the necessary measures are not taken, what we can see, it can lead to several energy security questions, And also, simply market. If the demand is high, supply is not enough, we may see the cost of those critical minerals going up and the cost of transition going up and the slowing down of the clean energy transition. So this is another the tension point in terms of orderly transition. Third and the last point I wanted to mention to you in terms of the orderly transition's impact. It is about people, because if the oil, gas, and coal demand goes down, it is in line with our 1.5 degrees trajectory, the communities and the countries whose economies are intimately indexed to the revenues coming from oil, gas, and coal production and related activities will be negatively affected from that. And why do we want clean energy transition? For people? But then you are doing something to make the people losing jobs, having some negative impact. So therefore, it is extremely important that the governments, first of all, within the countries, find ways to address the issues ranging from the employment to other negative implications on the communities. But more importantly, what will happen to those countries whose economies are based on the oil and gas revenues? This is extremely important. And this is an issue for those countries. And my friend, Mr. Ambassador Yassin and myself, we discuss these issues all the time, and how to diversify their economies before it is too late. Some countries like Iraq, Emirates, they are making steps, but some others are not in the same doing in the same direction. So this is the other point that on the clean energy transition and the impact on the people. And we have in fact built a group, a high-level commission at the IEA, chaired by the Prime Minister of Denmark. My good friend Joe Manchin is one of from the United States, a member of it. I was with him yesterday at the dinner. We discussed this issue as well as several ministers, several businessmen, people from Vatican, high-level people from Vatican, to look at this issue. It's a problem for all of us, because we want to see this happening, clean energy transition for people, not against people. Dear colleagues, I would like to finish by making two remarks on, in fact, two fuels or two technology options, and I stop here, and I would be very happy to discuss further. One is that I wanted to make this remark because I see in the United States what is happening in the electric car market is perhaps less understood than the rest of the world. Now, in US, we don't see this happening, but in major other car markets, electric car penetration is going very strongly. First, a global number. In the year 2019, only 2 years ago, of all the cars sold in the world, 2% were electric cars. And this year, it is about 10%. And again, US is not yet part of it. If I look at the two other big markets, China and Europe, both of them, last month, about 20% of all the cars sold were electric cars. So why I am saying this, first to give this news, I should say news, information shared with my American colleagues and friends here, but this is coming, and it will have a lot of implications from oil industry to the car manufacturers in the United States. This is one point I wanted to make. The second and the last point I want to make is to repeat to you something that I talk in France, in Paris, last week, a major world nuclear meeting. Nuclear is set to make a comeback, nuclear energy. Nuclear is set to make a comeback. For two reasons. Number one, many governments understand that while renewables will play a very important role to clean up our power system, we may also need, in addition to that, nuclear power to help the renewables to decarbonize and have a reliable the networks, the electricity grids, the system here, electricity security. This is number one. And the recent, in Europe and in Asia, recent volatility of the gas prices played a role there. So these are the two things, to address the climate change and energy security. And I can tell you that where I live in France, President Macron, when he started his term, he said very clearly, I am going to decrease the share, I would like to see the decreasing share of nuclear power significantly. And now, very recently, he said, I want to see not only keep the ones we have, run them longer, but a major offensive, I would say, a major push for the new nuclear power plants to build in France. UK is the same, many Eastern European countries. Japan is restarting its nuclear power plants. China is very, very strong. India is coming along, and several Eastern European countries are there. And some of the countries in Europe who decided to phase out nuclear power they are giving a second thought of postponing 1 or 2 years of their phase-out policies. So I can tell you that I believe the nuclear is set to make a comeback. In my personal view, because I have member governments who love nuclear, the others who do not love nuclear, but my personal view is it is good news for energy security, and it's a good news to address the climate challenges, of course, in the countries where it is accepted. With this, may I thank you, Joseph, once again for inviting me to CSIS, to one of my second addresses in Washington, D.C. My first address is my daughter's house, so I should tell you that. That's the second address, so one of the second addresses, and many thanks to you, John, for your kind remarks. And if we have any questions, I will be happy to take them. Thank you.
And it's just like Zoom. You have to remember to turn your microphone on. Thank you very much. A rich, detailed, at times provocative talk, which is exactly what we would expect. And we're very grateful that you're joining us here today. For our guests joining by live stream, if you have a question, please start composing those and submitting them via the website now, so we have a chance to group them and offer them to Fatih as we embark on our discussion. I am very grateful you're here. I am also grateful to have the privilege of asking the first question. You described the challenge that we face in the energy system as having sort of, I would say, two timescales. One is, over the next few years, deploying as quickly as possible those technologies which are commercial or near commercial. Electric vehicles was an example you gave right at the end of the talk. Nuclear would be a second one. And then there's this second time scale, which is, developing the technologies we know we need for a net zero world. I think in that basket you could fit carbon capture and storage, you might fit various kinds of nuclear technology, small modular reactors as an example. When you think about the sort of technology race, right? We've seen some technologies succeed over the last few years, like the advancements we've seen in solar generation have been wonderful, right? When you're talking to your staff and thinking through projecting the energy system as it undergoes these changes, as governments and firms are making intentional campaigns to reduce the costs of their technologies and grow into the marketplace. What are the places where you ride your analysts the hardest? Where do you think that our picture 5 or 10 years from now might be quite different?
Yeah. So, first of all, I should tell you that when I look at the data, the investments, the appetite for the financial institutions, the projects, government policies, I can tell you with one line the executive summary of all of these things. If I have to put everything in one line, a new global energy system is emerging. It is coming. We like it, don't like it, with the electric cars, with the hydrogen, with the renewables and others. This doesn't mean, again, I have colleagues who insist to misunderstand. This doesn't mean that as of tomorrow we don't use any oil, we don't use any gas, but they have to come down. They have to. Now, the issue is how do we bring the cost down? And here, one important element is the international collaboration among the countries. And in the absence of international collaboration, it will take much longer, it will be much more costlier. Having said that, I want to bring a new dimension to our discussion. Why countries push hydrogen, for example? Why countries push electric cars? It is not only to save the planet, to save the world. It is also for the industry policy reasons. Mm-hmm. And there is a race between the countries who will be the leader of the clean energy technology X and who is going to export it in the future. Countries who are not able to read the game, who are not positioning themselves rightly, may well be stuck with the old industry and lose their competitive edge to other countries. And it is for the United States, it's important, in my view, point to understand. The United States has been the leader of innovation decades and decades when it comes to energy technologies. But here, I expect the US, from carbon capture and storage to hydrogen, from electric vehicles to advanced nuclear technologies, there is a role for United States to play. Not only because US is one of the countries who has a responsibility in terms of emission reductions, but also prepare the US economy for the next chapter of the clean energy industry. So therefore, we should bear in mind, in my view, that the drive for clean energy technology, or as you mentioned, the innovation, they are not only driven by the moral issues of saving the world, mm-hmm. but also position the countries and the companies in the right way. Just you mentioned electric cars. Before coming here a few weeks ago, I had a meeting with the 20 top car manufacturers of the world. Okay? 18 out of 20 car manufacturers in the world put the electric cars as the #1 priority of their manufacturing strategy. Why they are doing this? All these CEOs are they are thinking of the next generation, saving the planet. I'm sure they do. But in addition to that, they want to position their companies in the right part of the next chapter of the car manufacturers. They want their companies to be profitable. So this is an issue that I wanted to underline when I am in DC.
And did you share that perspective with Mr. Manchin last night?
I think with many people. So he's definitely, he's a very powerful, very wise senator. We discussed many things, of course.
Excellent. let me, and for our guests, we're going to appeal to your wisdom in a moment, but I've got one more question because I think you've thought a lot about this. I see that you bear the scars of being slightly misinterpreted when you made the net zero scenario, but what in this challenge over the next decade does keep you up at night when you say that we see demand heading in one direction for energy services broadly defined. We see supply, which is predicated by investment at another level, and there's a gap between those two things that we're not filling quite fast enough with clean energy finance. What are the things that we should really look out for, or government should look out for in the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah. So it's a very good question, but before that, I have to make it something clear. There were scars, but I have, as John mentioned, I worked at the IEA since almost 25 years. One of the persons who hired me is here, Mr. Guy Caruso, who hired me to IEA. I hope, Guy, you are still happy that you hired me to IEA. So I made many reports. Yeah. I was in charge of many reports. I contributed to many reports. I have never seen any report which has been as successful as this one. No comparison. Companies, governments, as I said today, the largest pension fund of Europe, instead of peanuts, is using our report to design their strategy. Many institutional investors, the biggest ones, they have almost $10 trillion managing assets using our report. Governments, Indonesian government just last week wrote us, can you make the same roadmap for Indonesia? So many things. I don't want to go to the Vatican, many places. Of course, there are different views. There were, because it's a completely new alphabet for the energy sector, and we are having a dialogue discussion to understand each other better. Okay, coming to your question, what is the biggest, for me, the fault line, if I have to pick up one thing, is the following. It is how we are going to finance clean energy in the developing world. Because when we look at the next 20 years, more than 90% of the emissions growth will come from the developing world, the emerging world. Mm-hmm. And if everything stays as it is, it will be very difficult to accelerate the mobilization of the financement in the emerging world. This is the fault line. What kind of mechanisms we can build that in Bangladesh, we are going to make a major inroads for, I don't know, solar or wind or electric cars. And this is the biggest challenge ever. And at the same time, making sure that the energy is secure. One heartbreaking number, I can give it to you. I don't know if we have anybody from following from Africa. You know, Sub-Saharan Africa, think about the Sub-Saharan mm-hmm. Africa, the map. 600 million people have no electricity there. Number two, Sub-Saharan Africa has the largest solar potential in the world. Okay? And solar is extremely cheap today, we all know. This is one picture. Take in the same map, put the UK here. Entire Sub-Saharan Africa, the solar electricity generation is only 1/3 of United Kingdom solar electricity generation. Think about the size of UK, Sub-Saharan Africa. Think how sunny is UK and how sunny is Sub-Saharan Africa. I think this is amazing. And 600 million people have no electricity. This is very heartbreaking in my view. So therefore, how we are going to finance the clean energy transition in developing countries is for me the fault line of all the next few years we are going to have in front of us.
And do you think that solving that or crossing that gap is a matter of institutional reform, or we do need
Definitely.
New institutions to address
all
this challenge?
New institutions or the existing institutions, international financial institutions, should work better, including the ones in this town. In my view, they should put the mobilizing investments in the developing world is a priority in the lending processes.
All right. I believe we have a microphone that's prepared to circle in the room. We'll go ahead and find our first hand up over here. And we welcome questions from the audience. And we'll take 2 questions, and then we'll turn to our online audience.
Great.
Remember,
Thanks.
A question begins with a brief introduction and then a sentence that goes up at the end.
Great. Familiar with it. David Goldwyn, Atlantic Council. Good to see you, Fatih. While we're transitioning to the new economy, some of the energy security risks of the existing economy remain, particularly the threat of sanctions against Russia and gas security in Europe. So I wonder if you could comment on how you're thinking about gas security for Europe, the importance of the U.S. in that economy, and perhaps the role of gas in the energy transition.
Shall I?
Yes, please.
So this is, David, an excellent point. And I am happy that this point is raised here since 2.5 days for the first time. In my view, it's a very burning question, both from energy perspective and also from geopolitical issue. Now, first of all, dear colleagues, today, the natural gas prices in Europe are 7 times higher than before the pandemic. 7 times. This is incredible. And this is, some people are thinking this is because of or portraying it as it is the reason for, or driven by the clean energy transitions. It has nothing to do with that. There is enough gas. And we look at it, Joseph, if Russia wanted, they have easily, but easily, increased the exports by 15%, easily. But we made it publicly known, and a few days later, Russian government said they are going to do it, they will increase by 10% on 8th of November if, this is important, if the European governments understand the priorities of Russia in different areas. I will not count them, but they are not energy related. Mm-hmm. So this is what we have to understand. And there is, if Russia wants to be seen as a reliable partner, Russia or a reliable exporter, Russia needs to increase its how should I say, exports to Europe, and which they can easily do. Some of the storages that Russia has in Europe are very, very low level storage levels, less than 10%, which has never been the case. Again, I am worried about the increasing geopolitical tensions. Even the discussion of there may be sanctions for the Nord Stream 2 gave a boost, additional boost to the European gas prices. So for me, it is very important to see this issue, and the European leaders, and including the allies of Europe, which is the United States, should make clear that this issue of high gas prices can be easily solved in the commercial terms if the Russia would increase its exports, which they have the gas. They said they have the gas. And this, by the way, I mentioned 8th of November. They said that not much has changed, if anything, after 8th of November in terms of flows of gas from Russia to Europe. I think this is, I can tell you that when it comes to Europe, we have colleagues from the gas industry here, but neither in Europe nor in the Asia Pacific, what happened in the last few months with the gas markets, gas industry didn't get good marks from millions of consumers in this part of the world, because gas has been presented as a reliable, affordable and cleaner energy source, but we have seen 7 times increase of any good is really not normal, to be honest with you. And it is, I mentioned the nuclear a few minutes ago. One of the drivers of the nuclear coming back is driven also because of what happened in terms of the energy security, gas security. Nuclear get an additional boost from that.
Right. As we look at an energy transition, are the challenges we're seeing in Europe now, you say that they're not driven by energy transition, but as we look at a world where we are shrinking the oil and gas industry over time, are they prelude to challenges we may see, and do we need to get better at managing energy security on sort of the annual to multi-annual timescale?
Energy security is critical, the key issue, and we have to see that even today, oil prices around $70, it came to $70, I think, which is much more reasonable than we had a few weeks ago. And I hope that we see prices which are reasonable at a time where the global economy is just recovering from a major crisis.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, Fatih, thank you. Bill Hederman. I wanted to, I'd love to dive deeper on the gas, but there's a subject that you did not bring up that I'm curious about. I'm sure from other discussions that I've heard you have that it's important to you, but conservation and greater efficiency, where do you see that in the hierarchy of the things you're talking about?
This is, I think when I said the next 10 years, we have to make most of the existing clean energy options together with renewables, energy efficiency, conservation is critical. I give you one example from India. We have an Indian diplomat here. You know, in India, we are building power plants, which is in order to meet the demand growth, okay? And this is, it can be renewables, it can be coal, it can be whatever. Do you know what is the single largest driver of huge electricity demand growth in India? It is by far, air conditioners. And in India today, only 5% of all the households have an air conditioner, whereas it is in Japan 90% and United States as well. With the increasing income levels in India, with the increasing temperature of the climate in India, people will simply buy new air conditioners, which will give another boost to the electricity demand growth, and also, of course, building new power plants. Why I am saying this? In India, on average, an air conditioner uses 3 times more electricity compared to, for example, Japan or United States to provide the same thermal comfort. 3 times more electricity. And this can be easily fixed if they have the standards and norms and the regulations. If they were efficient, they will use less electricity, you will conserve this, and you will build less power plants. You keep the money in the pocket, and you have less emissions. And therefore, there is a huge potential for energy efficiency improvements. It is the easiest one. You don't need to discover a new technology. You just have the right policies here. So I am thankful to you that you asked this question, because what I believe is that some countries have the solar potential, some wind, some gas, but every country has the energy efficiency potential. So we have to make the most out of it with the right policies. For example, I mentioned India. We work with Indian government to have these standards and norms for the manufacturers to put for air conditioners, with Indonesia for the industrial sector and the others to make this happen. For me, energy efficiency is the very top priority when it comes to energy policy design.
Question coming in from online. You spoke about, at the beginning of your talk, this, energy being good, emissions being bad.
Yeah.
This is a high-level question, but are we on the right path for creating a world of low-cost energy and low-emissions energy? And if not, what do governments coming out of COP or advance to the next COP, what do governments need to do to make sure we get on a better path?
I think we have to make sure that we push the clean energy technologies I mentioned. And there is one technology for me which is extremely critical to make this part of the market, which is carbon capture and storage. This is a very important technology, and this technology can help us to make a link between the existing energy system and the energy system we want to reach. Because I have no problem with any energy source. My problem is with the emissions. And carbon capture and storage can help us to reach there. But in addition to the top priorities such as pushing the renewables, energy efficiency, electric cars, and in my view, for example, the nuclear power, hydrogen, and others. There is Joseph, this transition is such an important issue that we cannot leave everything 100% to the markets. There is a need for role for the public policy here. And we are talking about the cost of action. How much does it cost to go from this to that? But we don't talk about one thing. What is the cost of inaction? Much more frequent extreme weather events and much more intense.
Right.
Who is going to pay for that? So this the cost of inaction is also something to, I think, bear in mind when we look at the cost of action going from X to Y.
All right, excellent. I'm going to close with a climate question, hopefully to seed our next conversation when you come back to CSIS. But we've got one more coming in from the audience before we do that.
Hi, thanks. Fatih, Kevin Buck from Clearview Energy Partners. The question of strategic reserves has been in the news recently.
Yeah.
So sort of a two-part question. The first part is, what do you think about the use of deploying strategic reserves as a price management tool given the original security mandate? And the second is, as we make this transition, you mentioned the concentration of geographic risk. Does there need to be a strategic reserve created or conceived for transition metals, minerals, and related technologies? Thanks.
So at the IEA, we are using our country's strategic reserves when there is a physical supply disruption. This is why there's a collective action of the IEA member countries requires a physical supply disruption. But I understand that the countries such as US, UK, Japan, Korea, China, India come from as they were really seeing the risk of the economic recovery is being challenged. It is their decision. I understand, I respect this, but when it comes to IEA, the collective action of the stock release happens when there is a physical supply disruption. Your second question is a very good one as well. I can tell you that I would be very happy to see that the countries around the world come together and think about it, what they can do in a collective manner in order to make sure that the critical minerals availability is there, both in terms of the physical availability and in terms of the affordability of those critical minerals. I think building such a mechanism is something that we are discussing. And the report I mentioned we made a few months ago, I think you read it, Joseph, the critical minerals report. One of our conclusions was it may not be a better idea to build a mechanism and safety net, voluntary stockpile, whatever you call it, that the countries come together in terms of the critical minerals. Not exactly the same, but inspired by the oil stockpile mechanisms that the IEA had built since many, many years. but such a safety mechanism it may well be something that the countries should think, and it was one of our main recommendations.
Right. A rich ground for further discussion. Unfortunately, I wish we had more time, but we do not. Time has moved relativistically for me in this conversation, and unfortunately, we're at the end. I want to plant with you one idea, and not to put you on the spot, but we can kick it to our next conversation. Very early in your talk, you said that this is something that countries need to all solve, right? Everyone has to finish the race if anybody's going to win the race on climate. There are a host of technologies that are being conceived of. The principal one would be carbon removal. That is processes to remove carbon from the atmosphere and deposit it in durable media, whether that's geological storage or esoteric kinds of concrete or soils. Does that break or change? First of all, what's your view on this technology? And does that break or change the gamesmanship that we see on international climate negotiations over the long term?
I think it is a technology which is critical, but whether or not we will have this technology in at affordable cost, if we bring the cost down or not, this is a key issue. But we will, when I look at the trends, the question is not will we need to remove carbon from the atmosphere. The question is how much carbon we have to remove from the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So the less is the better, but we will need this technology. Hopefully, this technology proves to be affordable for many governments around the world. But this is definitely within the family of the carbon capture. It has an important role to play.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you for coming to CSIS today. Thank you for coming to Washington generally. And, we deeply appreciate your work, the work of the IEA. You have a hard job. Not everyone is brave enough to put out the numbers and to subject their ideas to such scrutiny. We congratulate you on all the work that you do. Thank you for coming. We look forward to our next discussion. To our audience, both here and watching from wherever you are, thank you kindly for your engagement. Be well.